At 4 a.m. in the morning of November 5, 2024, I shot a beam of light out of my index finger onto the ceiling. And it bounced back downwards and scattered. What may have caused this? I'm still stumped to this day. Was it a hallucination? It was like the spirit gun from Yu Yu Hakusho. Once I shot the beam of light, I felt a sense of relief. My brain went from chaotic to calm. My pulse was around 75. But later it felt to me like it was an omen. Sadly, I haven't been able to replicate it. Maybe I am crazy. I can't explain what I saw. So a few nights ago, my husband and I were up really late and we went outside to smoke a cigarette. When we got outside, suggested we walk to the stop sign at the end of the road and then turn around and come back home. While we were on our way back home, we see this thing. It was totally black and very short. It looked like a child. However, it was alone and it was like 3 in the morning. So I say, what the fuck is that? Is that a kid? And while we were both looking at it, it stepped off the road into someone's yard and just totally disappeared. It didn't go behind something. It literally just stepped off the road and it was gone. I'm freaking baffled by this. Anyone seen anything like this? I still don't know what I saw. So what do you all think? I have never told anyone about this, but think of it regularly because it was such a bizarre experience. I don't remember how old I was a kid, somewhere around 8 to 11 years old. I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and looking toward my open bedroom door. I saw what looked like my brother float up to my door. But, whatever it was see-through, and it literally floated up to the doorway. I looked at him, and said, J underscore 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 underscore, his name, what are you doing? Get out. It looked at me, smiled, and floated out the way it came. Now, since I remember waking up, it could absolutely be possible that the whole thing was a dream. But, I distinctly remember waking up. If not a dream, what is your take on it? Thank you for reading and weighing in. Edited to add, my brother is 2 years younger than me. So at the time, if I was 8 to 11 years old, he was 6 to 9 years old. I don't know if this would make a difference in what your theories would be. So here is the story. I am a service member in the US military. My friend sent me this picture after a long conversation about panic attacks, vivid nightmares, and spiritual warfare. She and myself have both struggled with nightmares and panic attacks, but this image was from her friend's experience. Apparently, the guy who captured this photo was struggling with visions and vivid nightmares about this shadow man for a while now. He also had a severe heart condition, possibly partly due to his panic attacks. Allegedly, after a long night of getting glimpses of this thing, he was able to take a picture of it. I was immediately skeptical of it, and I still am. I know that this all seems like bullshit, and I hope it is, because I have never in my life experienced something so terrifying. My friend swears on her life that to her knowledge the image is real and hasn't been posted anywhere by the guy who allegedly had this experience. I immediately put it through several reverse image searches and couldn't find anything. She also told me that the saturation is turned up to make the image clearer. I trust her, but I don't know her friend. Can anyone please help me test this photo? I mean, it looks real, but I'd like to know if it's been photoshopped or AI generated. Thanks. I was sitting in my front yard alone next to the fire. It was about 10 p.m. when this first happened. Sitting there smoking a cigarette, I heard something meow in the trees about 30 feet away. I walked over after yelling for it, and then I heard a very pronounced, very human-like meow. I don't know how else to explain it other than a grown-ass man saying meow. I freak out and run to my neighbors thinking it's a monster or some shit. 10 seconds after I get inside, all of his power goes out. I run home and grab my gun, and then something ran across my yard. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't an animal. I'm not crazy, I know what I saw and no one will believe me. Update. Sorry guys, I had to work at 8 today and just been kind of relaxing and going to the property and check some shit out, and I did find about 3 sets of deer tracks through the area where I heard the meowing, but other than that I haven't seen or heard anything else. Didn't mean to leave y'all high and dry. I honestly just got sidetracked and forgot to put in a little update. Edit. *, my daughter was not and does not sleep alone on the couch at night. She sleeps in her own bed, own room, comfortable and happy. While I appreciate the concern, my daughter's sleeping arrangements aren't the point of this post. She fell asleep on the couch with us while we were watching TV, so we let her sleep while we finished the show. I went upstairs to head to bed while my husband was downstairs, 2 rooms over in the kitchen filling his water bottle, and was going to grab her to bring her upstairs to her room right after. *. Just as the title states, my husband and I stayed up pretty late the other night binging a show. We finally decided to head to bed. I went upstairs, closed the bedroom door and turned the fan on, then laid my head down while he headed to the kitchen to fill up his water bottle. The second I laid down, I heard what can only be described as a demonic, something out of a horror movie scream coming from downstairs. I was frozen in fear for a moment, then decided to text my husband and ask if he heard it too. He immediately texted me at the same time to confirm he heard it, and as soon as he did, he bolted to the living room to check on our 2-year-old daughter as she was sleeping on the couch, to find her passed out, mouth open and snoring, so we know it couldn't have come from her. Not that she could make that kind of sound to begin with, we just were trying to make sense of it. But it did come from our living room. I feel actually insane explaining it because it felt like something that only happens in horror movies. I've never experienced this before. We live in the city, and it was 35 degrees that night, so we had all our windows shut. The sound didn't come from outside. We ruled out any animals' noises as we don't have a ton of foxes in the areas, let alone in the city. Our home is 114 years old, and right across the back alley from a funeral home, selling point for us, and when we first moved in, our neighbors and a few others had stated the house was haunted, but in the past 2 years we've lived here, we've never experienced anything that terrifying. The odd shadow figure in our peripherals, sounds that could be chalked up to our cats, sleep paralysis has frequented me more often, but as for paranormal activity, I wouldn't confirm our house is necessarily haunted. It hasn't happened since. We're both extremely confused and slightly terrified. I did smudged our home heavily the next morning, windows open, and let out the stagnant energy. Anyone have ideas on what it possibly could have been, if not a terrifying paranormal event? A few years ago I was living in a house with a bunch of activity. Every night I was woken by knocking and scratching on the wall behind my head, despite that wall not connecting to a neighbor. I put this down to animals, but it spooked me a bit. Then my cat started acting strange around the wardrobe in our bedroom. It was there when we moved in, and she would sit and stare at it for hours, occasionally moving to stick her face down the side of it and meow. We moved the wardrobe expecting to find a dead mouse or something of that nature, but there was nothing there. Just an old makeshift cane/rod, that I'd like to believe was only used in a playful way and not as a genuine punishment for someone. We put the cane back, but after that our toddler started waking up screaming in the night and pointing in terror at the ceiling in her room, saying "man there" over and over. We moved her bed into our room after the 3rd time this happened. One night I was lay in bed about to go to sleep when I heard someone downstairs. I panicked, desperately tapping my partner's arm trying to wake him without alerting the intruder. He wasn't waking up, and eventually I heard someone making their way up the stairs. I grabbed a nearby pair of scissors and waited to be confronted with this stranger, but as they walked into my room, they didn't. I could hear their footsteps continue into my room, but no person was connected to them. I froze in fear and listened to the footsteps stop next to the wardrobe, then they disappeared. We moved out shortly after for unrelated reasons, and over the years the activity seems to have gotten worse. My family constantly hears each other talking or calling out for one another even though it wasn't us. For example, I heard my daughter clear as day say hey right behind me the other week, so I said hey back. Of course she was on the other side of the house. My daughter, 5 when this happened, went to get a plate from a low-down kitchen cabinet and told me she heard a man's voice in there saying hello, I see you. I checked for any spaces that could lead to the neighbor's house through there and found nothing. Every night my daughter will now have night terrors. She never remembers them. She's afraid of going into certain rooms alone, other rooms are fine. She'll regularly hear me calling to her and call back asking what's up. I tell her I never shouted her name, but she's convinced that it's me and I'm just messing with her. Now here's my mistake. I bought a Ouija board into the house after my grandma passed, out of curiosity as I've never used one before. My daughter wanted to join and asked for a name. The planchette just spelled hi over and over, and when I asked would you like us to go, it said yes. So we stopped the game, but we forgot to say goodbye. I assumed any weird experience was either my imagination or my grandma coming to check in. So I welcomed it. Every noise or shadow I saw drifting across the hallway, I said out loud, hey grandma. Well, whatever happened an hour before writing this, it wasn't my grandma. I was having a bad dream, nothing crazy, but I was walking around a town in the 40s/50s. Eating boiled sweets and drinking awful coffee, when a man in a suit brushed up against my back. I took my backpack off to check, nothing was wrong with it, the top had been opened but nothing had been taken or left inside. I felt that was strange but continued on my day. I visited the cinema and decided to get some food, when I saw the same man. Coincidence, but we're in the same town so it wasn't too strange. Until he bumped into me again, which didn't make sense as he had plenty of space, the room was huge. I took my bag off to inspect it and this time he hurried off as though he'd put an explosive in my bag. It was open but again, nothing in there. At this point I told myself to look at the clock. The time was all jumbled and it reminded me I was dreaming, and I promptly woke up. As soon as I woke up I heard it, someone walking up the stairs. He was humming to himself, the same 3 notes over and over. I kept my eyes shut and tried to nudge my partner to wake him up, again he wasn't waking. I heard the man walk into the bedroom, come to my side of the bed. All things I could have written off, but then he moved part of the cover off me. I felt it, I felt the cold air hit my shoulder as the cover came off, I felt the sensation of the cover moving off me, I felt him standing close to me and heard him shifting the weight of his feet between each other. I was completely convinced there was a non-paranormal full-flesh human standing next to me and that I needed to open my eyes and fight him or I'm done. So I counted down and sprung open my eyes to be greeted by nothing. I shook my partner awake this time and told him everything. I was sweating and my heart was pounding at this point from the adrenaline of preparing to fight an intruder, and I was struggling to calm myself back down. He went back to sleep, and I sat here thinking back on the similarities between tonight's event and the one years ago in a different house. This one felt much more malicious. The man in my dream terrified me. He was tall and fairly skinny, in a gray suit that didn't seem to fit him properly. He looked a little disheveled and was maybe in his 40s. I got the feeling he used to work for a government agency but either left or was fired. And he was so calm, but I felt this cruelty about him, just a completely cold person. I have a huge migraine and there's no way I'm getting back to sleep, so if you made it this far please let me know your thoughts. Is this just a mixture of old plumbing and my imagination, or is there something else I should consider here? My dreams often end up coming true a few weeks to a few months after I've had them. They're incredibly vivid and I can figure out I'm in a dream pretty easily to influence whether I wake up or not. This one I just can't figure out. I don't recognize this man at all. Why was I in the 1940s to 50s? What was he trying to put in my bag? The whole thing has left me confused. In 2015 I moved into a very old house that was completely renovated. For almost 4 years I didn't feel at home. I had the impression of living in someone else's house, despite the work and modernization of the place. This feeling of presence, the impression of being observed. I had a lot of sleep paralysis. I didn't go a night without nightmares. I would like to point out that I was not in a period of stress or anything else, quite the contrary. One morning I wake up, and there I see a person. The feeling was so benevolent, unlike usual. I see this man smile at me and leave. The feeling that came naturally to me was this person wants you well and lets you live in this house. Since that moment I have never had the feeling of sneaking up on someone's home loudly crying face, and no more sleep paralysis or nightmares. I have never experienced anything similar before or since. What do you think? A few years ago, I woke up one morning with my abuser, who began a fight with me because I politely told him I was having a bad mental health and please be nice to me that day. He threw some furniture around and screamed at me at the top of my lungs, degrading me and calling me names and slurs. I fully lost hope at that moment and gave up. It was the final straw and I felt like I'd never be free of the abuse. He dragged me to an amusement/theme park that day and I miserably walked around with him all day. At one point we sat down to eat some food. The only empty seat was at the same table as this married couple. We very briefly chatted about the food and the park. We then got up and kept walking around. A few hours later, the woman from this married couple we ate with flagged me down and waved me over. She said, "I don't know if you're spiritual or not, and I don't mean to alarm you, but I've been noticing something attached to you all day. Something bad. It's been following you." She looked directly into my eyes as she said this, and asked me if I would mind if she said a prayer for me right then and there. I agreed. She said the prayer. Unfortunately my abuser didn't realize she was talking directly to me, and he kind of hugged the whole conversation and told her that he's been having such a hard time lately and really needed help while crying. Little did she know he was sexually abusing me at the time and attempted to do so that very morning. I was hoping for a moment of privacy with this woman to tell her what's going on so maybe she could help me. A few years later, I'm still stuck here, and the abuse has gotten worse. A few nights ago, I randomly woke up in the middle of the night and felt fully awake and not groggy at all. Then I heard a male voice whisper hello very clearly. My abuser stirred in his sleep and stopped snoring, and our dog woke up, too, and made a curious sound. I very clearly felt eyes on me, but I was so scared to actually see anything that I shut my eyes and lay there fully awake until I fell back asleep again. I have also been having a major increase in sleep paralysis lately, but it feels so different than other times. It feels so much more evil. I will dream that I am awake in bed, and either a male or female demonic entity with the most horrific demented appearance comes to me and begins mutilating me, raping me, or tickling my armpits, which is a very painful sensation for me. My usual methods for waking from sleep paralysis don't work during this, and I have no choice but to lay there helpless, being killed or raped in the most vivid dream imaginable. Does anyone have any guidance? I've heard that demons attach themselves to you in your weakest moments, and I've been having many such moments in this awful shitty relationship. I know that it's mostly my abuser's doing, but I can't help but feel like something purely evil has attached itself to me to torture me further. I feel depressed and anxious 24/7, like a gigantic cloud of malaise just trailing me everywhere. I feel enveloped in darkness. I am not religious, but I am a very spiritual person and believe in God. Since I work night shifts, I like to spend my nights off at the gym or driving around. One night last week I found myself on a secluded road ending at a boat ramp, somewhere completely rural. A pair of railroad tracks crossed through the road on the way to the boat ramp. I've been here quite a few times during the day, but I hadn't been there in a while, and figured I'd go during the night to see if it's a good stargazing spot. Now I'm more of a logical, skeptical person when it comes to the paranormal. I love reading spooky stories, and I love watching true crime. I've always said that I need a genuine encounter with something supernatural that defies logic to convince me. Being at this boat ramp definitely did. I had no reason to believe anybody else was there. While it is so secluded that no lights are on in the park, I felt something was there. I didn't feel alone. It wasn't long until I noped the fuck out of there, maybe 30 seconds, tops. Having an interest in true crime, I know of a serial killer that had once operated in my area in the 70s. I did not know any specifics of the victims or where they were found, only that they were found in orange groves, if that will give you any hints. So tonight I decided to do a little digging, tried to find maps, newspaper articles, or archives that might have given some indication as to where any of his victims were found. But I had one, in a documentary that's on YouTube, a split-second shot of a newspaper declaring his third victim found, at that railroad crossing. Instantly, chills ran through my entire body, and I've been sobbing for no reason since then. Even now, as I'm writing this. Granted, the remains are long gone, as they were found in 1973. The killer is behind bars. Whatever I felt there that night, it was horrifying. And that was before I knew of its relevance to that case from back then. It's to the point now that I will never go back there at night. I did not like the energy I felt there that night. I've told of this location to a friend of mine who is a paranormal investigator, and they said it's possible, given my reaction to the location, that it may be haunted by the spirit of his victim. Has anyone else had an instance like this? Where you got strange, scary vibes of a place, only to learn later that it has some gruesome history. A few years ago, my husband and I were in Vegas and decided to spend the money to do tourist trap stuff. So we went to Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum. We both went in with the knowledge that something of sorts might be there. We went the room with the Dybbuk box, and the minute I looked at it, my 40-year-old tattoo raised, got red and itched like crazy. I showed it to my husband, he raised one eyebrow and said don't scratch. As soon as we left the room, the itching was gone, the redness went away and it went back to normal. The tattoo was an exact copy of my grandpa's. I got it 2 days after his death. Any thoughts?
Like, share, subscribe and be sure to check the notification bell. Follow the Atomic Shaman on Twitter at Motel and RV Park. Listen to Paranormal Green Text Stories on Atomic Shaman TTS on YouTube. Catch the live streams of Atomic Shaman Sweat Lodge only on Rumble.